Welcome to this explainer. Okay, today we are diving into a political slugfest for the ages, a battle that many observers believe tested the very soul of the Democratic Party. We're dissecting the anatomy of an unbelievable election upset, the August 2026 Michigan Democratic Senate primary. On a super tense Tuesday night in August, the results of this single race sent shockwaves straight through Washington, D.C. And honestly, its impacts rippled all the way to the Middle East. It's a fascinating, high-stakes political case study, and by looking closely at the data and the dynamics, we can understand exactly how an underdog managed to beat the odds.
All right, we've got a ton of ground to cover today. We're going to break down the primary matchup, look at the historic campaign finance numbers, dive into the progressive messaging and demographics, recap that narrow historic victory, and finally, lay out the massive stakes for the November Senate race. Let's get right into it.
Section 1. The primary matchup. To really grasp what happened here, we've got to start with the candidates themselves.
The contrast between these two? Honestly, it could not have been sharper. In one corner, you've got Abdul El-Sayed. He's a 41-year-old epidemiologist, the son of Egyptian immigrants, and the former health director for Wayne County. That's where Detroit is. You might even remember he ran for governor once before, back in 2018. He brought a serious insurgent energy to this race, racking up heavyweight progressive endorsements from folks like Senator Bernie Sanders and Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who literally barnstormed the state for him. Now, in the other corner, you have Congresswoman Haley Stevens. She carried massive, rock-solid establishment backing, including late endorsements from Michigan's super-popular Governor Gretchen Whitmer and sitting Senator Gary Peters.
So what you have here is a classic showdown, the establishment versus the progressive insurgency. This wasn't just a clash of personalities. It was a massive ideological battle over the entire direction of the party. Everyone was watching Michigan as the ultimate test case, wondering, is it actually possible for a progressive insurgent to pull off a win in a purple, industrial Midwestern state? Moving on to Section 2, Historic Campaign Finance. And wow, did this stark contrast attract some serious cash.
$65 million. Just let that sink in for a second. That is the staggering amount of outside money that flooded into Michigan specifically to oppose El-Sayed. We're talking wall-to-wall attack ads trying to paint his platform as totally extreme and out of touch.
And breaking that down a bit further, over $30 million of that total came directly from AIPAC, the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, and its allies. They unleashed an absolute war chest to back Congresswoman Stevens and try to stop that insurgent momentum dead in its tracks.
Those mind-boggling numbers officially made this the single most expensive Democratic Senate primary in U.S. history. It was a literal David versus Goliath financial situation. The establishment had the bankroll, and they threw the kitchen sink at El-Sayed, meaning his team had to find a totally different way to connect with voters.
Which brings us to Section 3, Progressive Messaging and Demographics. So, how exactly do you fight back when you're facing the most expensive opposition campaign in history?
Well, El-Sayed's strategy was fascinating. Instead of pivoting to the center, he went all in on a bold, uncompromising progressive agenda. We're talking Medicare for all, taxing billionaires, abolishing ICE, and pushing strict campaign finance reform to get corporate money out of politics. But the issue that really ended up defining this race? Foreign policy. El-Sayed was incredibly vocal, calling for an end to U.S. military aid to Israel and explicitly condemning the war in Gaza as a genocide.
Now, to understand why that foreign policy stance was such a game-changer, you have to look at the numbers. Specifically, over 240,000. That is the estimated Muslim population in Michigan, making it one of the largest Arab American and Muslim communities in the whole country. For those voters, El-Sayed's unapologetic stance wasn't just campaign rhetoric, it struck a deep chord. It energized a massive grassroots base that had been feeling totally ignored by the traditional establishment.
And the campaign tied it all together brilliantly. Take this quote straight from the trail. Money to feed children at home, not for wars that killed children abroad. It's a powerful, direct message that seamlessly bridged his domestic goals, like investing in local healthcare, right to his anti-war foreign policy.
All right, let's jump to Section 4, a narrow historic victory. We've talked about the money in the message, so let's set the scene for election night, August 4th, 2026.
Guys, it was an absolute nail-biter. El-Sayed managed to pull off the win with just 48.7% of the vote, edging out Stevens at 47.2%. It was incredibly tight, and the race was really only secured when the late votes from Wayne and Washtenaw counties finally rolled in and El-Sayed's lead held up. So, razor thin? Absolutely. But monumental? Without a doubt.
Now, you might think dealing AIPAC its costliest defeat ever would lead to a victory lap, right? But El-Sayed did the exact opposite.
In his victory speech, he immediately pivoted to party unity. He asked his supporters for magnanimity, telling them, if your instinct is to be like, I told you, no. Let's come together to build a movement that's even bigger, that's even stronger. He knew the primary was just the first hurdle.
And that perfectly tees up Section 5, the November Senate stakes, because the national implications here are absolutely massive.
Here is what November is going to look like. You have a battle-tested Abdul El-Sayed, fresh off the most expensive primary in history, going up against Republican Mike Rogers. Rogers is a former congressman, he's got Donald Trump's endorsement, and crucially, he ran completely unopposed in his primary, so he is walking into the general election well-rested and fully funded.
And here is the magic number, 53. Right now, Republicans hold 53 Senate seats. That means Democrats have to flip 4 seats to take the majority. Because of that math, Michigan isn't just another race on the map, it is ground zero for control of the Senate. The entire balance of power in Washington basically hinges on this one Midwestern state.
Knowing those stakes, El-Sayed is definitely not backing down. On election night, he sent a crystal-clear warning to his opponent, saying, Mike, and I know you're listening, Mike, we are coming for you. It just goes to show the fierce, confident energy this insurgent campaign is carrying right into the general election.
But beyond just the balance of power, there is some major historical significance on the line here too. If Abdul El-Sayed wins in November, he would officially become the very first Muslim U.S. senator in American history. It adds this whole other layer of intensity to a race that is already under a massive national microscope.
The establishment threw $65 million at this progressive insurgency, and against all odds, the underdog still pulled it out. But the big question now, will that insurgent momentum and grassroots energy actually be enough to overcome a unified Republican front and decide the balance of the U.S. Senate in November? It's going to be a wild ride watching this unfold. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep learning, and I'll catch you next time.